Karen Whitmore stood frozen in her kitchen window, a morning coffee mug slipping from trembling fingers and shattering against the pristine marble floor. Outside, her neighbor's crystal blue swimming pool had vanished overnight, replaced by what looked like a sprawling black void stretching across the Hendersons' backyard. "What in God's name?" she whispered, pressing her face against the glass. The industrial black plastic sheeting covered every inch of the pool area, secured with yellow rope and metal stakes that reminded Karen uncomfortably of a crime scene. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and this abomination was the first thing she'd seen upon opening her custom plantation shutters. Karen's phone was in her hand before conscious thought kicked in. As vice president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, she had a sacred duty to protect property values and neighborhood aesthetics. Her fingers flew across the screen, scrolling through the HOA bylaws she'd memorized better than her own anniversary date. Section 4.2. Pool Maintenance and Appearance Standards, she muttered, scanning the text. All pools must be maintained in a clean, attractive condition visible from neighboring properties. Her voice trailed off. The regulation was frustratingly vague about temporary coverings. The Henderson house remained dark and silent. Karen had seen Jim Henderson leave at dawn for another one of his mysterious business trips, but Sandra's silver Lexus still sat in the driveway. Whatever this plastic monstrosity was, Sandra had to know about it. Karen threw on her HOA-approved beige cardigan and marched across the street, her sensible flats clicking against the spotless sidewalk with military precision. The closer she got, the more her horror grew. The plastic wasn't just covering the pool. It was professionally installed, complete with drainage grommets and reinforced edges. This wasn't some overnight prank or emergency measure. This was planned. She jabbed the doorbell with enough force to wake the dead. When Sandra finally answered, looking disheveled and exhausted, Karen didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What is that?" Karen pointed dramatically at the backyard. Sandra's face crumpled. "Oh, Karen, I'm so sorry. I meant to call the HOA board, but everything happened so fast." And Jim said, "Is that a pool cover?" "Technically, yes, but did you get HOA approval for this installation?" Sandra's silence spoke volumes. Karen felt her blood pressure rising, that familiar rush of righteous authority flooding her system. In her 12 years as an HOA board member, she'd never encountered such a blatant violation of aesthetic standards. "Sandra, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. This tarp is visible from 4 different properties and directly impacts our neighborhood's curb appeal. The spring home tour is in 6 weeks. Karen, please, if you just let me explain." But Karen was already calculating. Emergency board meeting. Violation notice. Possible legal action. The Hendersons had always been model residents, which somehow made this betrayal sting even more. Good neighbors didn't ambush each other with industrial ISOs. 24 hours, Sandra. You have 24 hours to remove this or provide proper documentation. As Karen stalked back to her house, she missed the tears streaming down Sandra's face. Karen sat in her Mercedes at 7 a.m. the next morning, watching the Henderson house through designer sunglasses like a suburban spy. The black plastic pool cover mocked her from across the street, its legitimacy now legally bulletproof, but no less offensive to her sensibilities. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Saw the neighborhood Facebook post about your pool drama. Maybe let it go?" Pool drama. As if protecting property values was drama. Karen deleted the message and refocused on her surveillance. Something about the Henderson story didn't add up. Construction runoff causing toxic contamination seemed convenient, especially when Jim Henderson worked in environmental consulting and would know exactly what paperwork to file. She'd spent 3 hours the previous night researching the construction project next door. The Patels were building a modest addition to their ranch home. Hardly the industrial operation that would create hazardous runoff. Karen had overseen the approval process herself. A flash of movement caught her eye. Sandra Henderson emerged from her garage carrying a large box labeled pool supplies. But if the pool was contaminated and covered, why would she need supplies? Karen started her engine and followed at a discreet distance as Sandra drove to Paradise Pool and Spa on Maple Street. She parked 2 spaces away and watched Sandra disappear inside the store, box in hand. 20 minutes later, Sandra emerged empty-handed and drove directly to the county health department. Karen's pulse quickened. This was either very thorough documentation of a legitimate contamination issue or the most elaborate HOA violation cover-up in Willowbrook Estates history. At the county building, Karen waited 15 minutes before following Sandra inside. The receptionist, a cheerful woman named Dolores whom Karen recognized from the annual charity drives, greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Whitmore, hear about the Henderson Pool situation." Karen's heart skipped. "You know about that?" "Oh honey, Sandra's been here every day this week. Such a shame about their poor pool. Chemical burns are no joke." "Chemical burns?" Dolores lowered her voice conspiratorially. "That construction runoff ate right through their pool liner. Sandra showed me pictures. Looked like something from a horror movie. Thank goodness they caught it before anyone went swimming." Karen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet again. Pictures? Awful stuff. Bright green water, dead animals. The liner all bubbled and dissolved. I've never seen anything like it in 15 years here. Karen excused herself and stumbled back to her car, her carefully constructed conspiracy theory evaporating in the afternoon heat. The Hendersons weren't scheming. They were victims. Victims of contamination. Victims of bureaucratic red tape, and victims of her own suspicious nature. But as she drove home, one detail nagged at her. If the pool liner was destroyed, why hadn't she seen any disposal trucks removing the damaged materials? In her 12 years of HOA vigilance, Karen had memorized the schedule of every garbage truck, landscaping crew, and repair service in the neighborhood. That evening, she positioned herself at her kitchen window again, watching the Henderson backyard with renewed focus. At sunset, she saw something that made her grab her binoculars. Jim Henderson was lifting one corner of the black plastic, peering underneath with a flashlight. He stood there for several minutes, completely motionless, before carefully securing the cover again and disappearing into the house. Karen lowered her binoculars, more confused than ever. If the pool was contaminated and drained, what was Jim looking at? And why did he look so satisfied when he walked away? Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Bob Martinez's name flashed on the screen. "Karen, we might have a problem," he said without preamble. "I just got off the phone with Mike Patel next door to the Hendersons. He says his construction never came within 50 feet of their pool, and his contractor is bonded and insured specifically to prevent runoff issues." Karen sank into her kitchen chair. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to take another look at that pool cover." All the more reason to find out now. Karen's HOA instincts were screaming, but they were drowned out by something deeper, a need to protect her neighborhood and, unexpectedly, to protect Sandra. They crept across the street together, 2 middle-aged women in bathrobes planning what amounted to breaking and entering. The Henderson backyard was eerily quiet, the black plastic cover looking even more ominous in the darkness. Karen knelt beside the pool's edge and carefully lifted one corner of the heavy plastic. The smell hit her immediately. Chemical and wrong. Nothing like chlorine or normal pool maintenance products. She pulled out her phone's flashlight and peered underneath. What she saw made her stomach lurch. The pool wasn't empty, but it wasn't full of water either. Instead, dozens of white plastic containers floated in a few feet of murky liquid, each labeled with hazardous waste symbols and company logos she recognized from around town. "Oh my God," Sandra whispered beside her. "He's been storing illegal waste in our pool." Karen's mind raced through the implications. Property values were the least of their problems now. If these chemicals leached into the groundwater, if they affected neighboring properties, if someone got hurt. "Sandra, we need to call the authorities. The real authorities." "I know," Sandra said, tears streaming down her face. I keep thinking about Emma. What if she tried to use the pool before Jim covered it? What if?" A light flicked on in the Henderson house. Both women froze. "He's awake," Sandra breathed. Karen carefully secured the plastic cover and grabbed Sandra's arm. "Go home. Act normal. I'll handle this. Karen, what are you going to do? Karen looked at her neighbor, really looked at her, and saw not the woman who'd violated HOA regulations, but someone who'd been trapped in an impossible situation by someone she trusted. What I should have done from the beginning, Karen said. Protect this neighborhood. As Sandra hurried back to her house, Karen pulled out her phone and dialed Bob Martinez. It was 3:47 a.m., but some conversations couldn't wait for morning. Bob, it's Karen. I need you to conference call Linda and Dave, and then I need you to call the EPA. Karen, what? The Henderson pool situation is bigger than we thought. Much bigger. As she walked back to her house, Karen realized she could see Jim Henderson standing at his office window watching her. Even from a distance, she could tell he knew that everything had changed. The HOA had handled noise complaints and fence disputes, but they'd never dealt with environmental crime. Karen smiled grimly as she reached her front door. There was a first time for everything, and this was one violation that wouldn't be solved with a simple fine and a stern letter. The real battle for Willowbrook Estates was just beginning. To be continued. The emergency HOA board meeting convened at 7 p.m. sharp in Karen's living room. Her fellow board members arranged around her glass coffee table like generals, planning a siege. President Bob Martinez looked uncomfortable. Secretary Linda Chen kept checking her phone, and Treasurer Dave Patterson hadn't stopped staring at the plate of Karen's homemade cookies. Let's cut to the chase, Karen began, sliding a manila folder across the table. The Henderson pool situation requires immediate action. Bob flipped through the photos Karen had taken from every conceivable angle. It's definitely noticeable. Noticeable? Karen's voice rose an octave. Bob, it looks like they're hiding a body back there. Maybe they are. Dave muttered through a mouthful of oatmeal raisin. Linda finally looked up from her phone. Has anyone actually talked to Sandra about why they did this? Karen bristled. The reason is irrelevant. They violated Section 4.2 without prior approval. The bylaws are clear. Are they, though? Bob pulled out his own copy of the regulations. Pool maintenance and appearance. It doesn't specifically prohibit covers. Obviously, it prohibits covers that look like that, Karen snapped. The doorbell rang before Bob could respond. Karen's heart jumped. She'd been expecting this moment. Through the peephole, she could see Sandra Henderson clutching a thick folder, her husband Jim beside her looking grim. The defendants have arrived, Karen announced. Karen, Linda warned, there are neighbors, not criminals. Karen opened the door with her most professional smile. Sandra, Jim, please come in. The Hendersons entered like condemned prisoners approaching the gallows. Sandra's folder was stuffed with official-looking documents, while Jim carried what appeared to be a laptop bag. Thank you for seeing us, Sandra began, her voice barely above a whisper. I know this looks terrible, but we have documentation. Documentation? Karen interrupted. For what? Jim stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. For emergency pool covering due to contamination. We received approval from the county health department and filed the appropriate notifications. He opened his laptop, revealing an official email chain. Karen leaned in, her confidence wavering for the first time in hours. The county letterhead was unmistakable, the language bureaucratic and official. Due to suspected chemical contamination from neighboring construction runoff, Jim read aloud, the Henderson residence pool requires immediate covering and testing. Duration, 30 to 60 days pending lab results. Bob whistled low. Chemical contamination? Sandra's composure finally cracked. The new construction next door, their foundation work sent God knows what into our pool. Emma found a dead squirrel floating in there Sunday morning, and the water turned this awful green color. The county said it could be toxic. Karen felt the room's energy shift. Linda was nodding sympathetically. Dave had stopped eating, and Bob was studying the county documents with newfound interest. Why didn't you call us immediately? Karen demanded, but her voice lacked its earlier authority. I tried, Sandra said quietly. I left you 3 voicemails yesterday. Karen's blood turned to ice. Her phone had been on silent all day during her monthly spa appointment. 3 voicemails she'd never checked, too busy preparing for this confrontation to listen to explanations. Jim pulled out another document. Here's the HOA notification form we submitted through the online portal yesterday at 11:47 a.m. That's impossible, Karen said. I check the portal every morning. Bob was already on his phone, logging into the system. His face went pale. Karen, it's here. Submitted yesterday, marked as pending review. The room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Karen stared at the evidence spread across her coffee table, her carefully constructed case crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. So, Linda said carefully, they did follow proper procedure. Karen's mind raced, searching for some foothold in the collapsing argument. The aesthetics clause still applies. County approval doesn't override HOA standards. Actually, Bob said, reading from his phone, emergency health and safety measures supersede aesthetic regulations according to our own bylaws. Section 12.4. Dave finally spoke up. So, we're approving the pool cover. The vote was 3-1. Karen stood at her bedroom window at 3 a.m., insomnia and suspicion keeping her vigilant. The Henderson house was dark except for a single light in what she knew was Jim's home office. Through her high-powered binoculars, a Christmas gift she'd initially found excessive, she could see him sitting at his computer, occasionally glancing toward the backyard. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Can't sleep either. Karen nearly dropped the binoculars. The message was from Sandra Henderson. Another text followed. I see your bedroom light. We need to talk. 5 minutes later, Karen found herself standing on her front porch in her robe, watching Sandra approach through the darkness. Even in the dim streetlight, Karen could see that Sandra looked haggard, like she hadn't slept in days. Thank you, Sandra said quietly. I wasn't sure you'd answer. What's this about, Sandra? Sandra glanced back at her house, then stepped closer. It's about the pool, and Jim, and the fact that I can't keep lying to everyone, including myself. Karen's pulse quickened. Lying about what? There's no contamination. There never was. Sandra's voice cracked. Jim made it all up. The county reports, the health department visits, everything. He's been faking the documentation. The words hit Karen like cold water. Her vindication and horror collided in her chest. But I saw the official emails, the county letterhead. Jim works in environmental consulting. He knows how to make fake documents look real. He's been doing it for months, maybe longer. Not just for us, for his clients too. Karen stared at Sandra, processing the implications. What's really under that pool cover? Sandra's laugh was bitter and broken. That's the thing, Karen. I don't actually know. Jim won't let me look. He says it's better if I don't know details. That way I can't accidentally say the wrong thing to neighbors or the HOA. But you're his wife. Am I? Sandra's voice rose slightly. Then she caught herself and looked around nervously. I found documents on his computer last week. Business emails about covering up environmental violations for construction companies. He's been taking money to falsify contamination reports. Karen felt her worldview shifting again, but this time the pieces were falling into a darker pattern. Sandra, what do you think is under that cover? I think, Sandra paused, wrapping her arms around herself. I think he's hiding evidence. Maybe contaminated soil, maybe chemicals he was supposed to dispose of properly. I found invoices for industrial waste that never got delivered to the processing facility. We need to look. I can't. If Jim finds out I talked to you, if he knows I suspect. Sandra trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Karen made a decision that surprised even her. Then I'll look. Karen, no. You don't understand how dangerous this could be. If there really are chemicals under there, if Jim's been using our pool as some kind of illegal disposal site,